So I wanted to start off by connecting again with the Schumacher convening statement that encourages us to celebrate the transformation of our economy wherever it's occurring, in our neighborhoods, in our green businesses, and in our regions. So in spite of all the many challenges that we know we have before us, there is much to celebrate, much going on at the grassroots level. We know that's where change begins, in our hearts and in our communities. Our local food systems are growing and strengthening. Young farmers are beginning to take to the land. My fellow Schumacher board member, Severin von Scharner-Fleming, is right over here with her dad, has organized the Greenhorns, which is an organization of young farmers. So this is a movement that's growing and something that we certainly need so much. Of course, the CSAs and the farmers markets are proliferating, and a growing number of grocery stores are selling locally grown fresh produce in their stores. And not only that, they're beginning to sell locally manufactured food products, everything from ice cream and yogurt to canned goods and sauces and soaps and soups and crackers and energy bars and tofu and seitan, even local gin and vodka. Did you ever think you'd have a local martini? Oh, it's here. Of course, the craft breweries, the microbrewers are in cities across the country. And do you know anyone that ever drinks a Bud anymore? I mean, you know, it's out. Locally manufactured clothing made from sustainable fabrics and sold from local independent retailers are sprouting up in cities across our country. I did a Kickstarter campaign, contributed to the campaign a few months ago for a men's underwear company that's now off the ground producing their men's underwear locally. And so I got as a little bonus, I got 12 pairs of men's red underwear, which my boyfriend was very happy about. So more and more community-based green businesses are sprouting up, and many are started by the next generation of entrepreneurs. And I noticed that this is a generation that is increasingly understanding that life is more important than lifestyle. Our cooperative movement is thriving. More and more businesses are owned cooperatively by workers, by producers, or consumers. And there are more and more opportunities to use renewable energy as the availability of solar, wind, and other renewables increases day by day. Have you bought your plug-in electric car yet? If you do, you can plug into a network of stations and private homes across the country where you can plug in, and you get to wear a t-shirt that says, "Drive no evil." So I'm looking forward to getting mine in the spring. There are new investment vehicles for getting capital to these local entrepreneurs, from crowdfunding to community banks to direct public offerings, and hopefully an increase in public banks that's moving money from Wall Street to Main Street. And there is a lot of collective joy in this work that I have felt myself, a collective joy in working towards a shared vision for our future and for our communities. Perhaps most importantly, by building a new global economy in which every community has food and water security and locally produced renewable energy, we are creating the foundation for world peace. As E.F. Schumacher himself said, people who live in highly self-sufficient local communities are less likely to get involved in large-scale violence than people whose existence depends on worldwide systems of trade. The concept of community self-reliance offers a meeting place for liberals and conservatives, an opportunity for a common vision in an otherwise divisive culture. While liberals value community and collective endeavors, the more important role of the self-reliant entrepreneur is sometimes overvalued. Conservatives, on the other hand, value self-reliance and individualism, but sometimes undervalue the importance of working collectively for the good of all. Put them together, and we have community self-reliance, not such a jump from either perspective. We need to listen to each other, as Otto points out, and see the reality. Perhaps this could be the basis for the socially conscious democracy that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote about, which, as he says, reconciles the truths of individualism and collectivism. At the 50th anniversary of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech in Washington in August, I was more excited to see that Van Jones was the commentator on CNN than I was to hear the other speakers. That was an amazing day, Van. So proud of you. I will always remember the first time I heard Van speak, about 15 years ago. At the time, he was leading the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights. I was at a conference, standing out in the hall chatting, and I heard a voice. I heard a voice speaking that I had never heard before. It was a voice of great eloquence and passion. "Who is this guy?" I said to myself, and I made my way to the room, which was packed to the gills, and squeezed into the crowd. I stood there transfixed by the speaker who was such a powerful voice for change. I knew that voice had a future to it. So it's no surprise that today, Van is now a host on CNN's Crossfire, sparring with his fellow panelist, Newt Gingrich. Go Van! Van was one of the first I heard speak both about social justice and the environment, at a time when leaders were usually identified as either an environmentalist or a human rights advocate. Van was both, and would proclaim, "This country can save the polar bears and the poor kids too." And when talking about our future, Van says, "We are fighting for the children of all species." As an animal lover, that warms my heart. Not only is Van a media commentator and producer, a TV star, an author with a degree from Yale University, but he's the father of 2 boys and the author of 2 books. In his 2007 book, The Green Collar Economy, Van suggested that invention and investment will be the vehicles to take us out of a pollution-based gray economy and into a healthy new green economy. That advocacy earned him a position as President Obama's special advisor for green jobs, with a mandate to help shape the regulations that would support the green entrepreneur. However, it was this White House experience that helped him to understand that it is not regulation that will change the direction of enterprise, but rather a new culture of business practices, a new culture of our consumptive patterns, a new culture of awareness about neighborhood economics and the need to actively engage and support those economies. It will take a cultural shift to effect an economic shift. With that in mind, he launched Rebuild the Dream, an organization dedicated to fighting for an economy that works for all. In his 2012 book, by the same name, Jones redefines the American dream and drafts a thoughtful plan for its reconstruction. It still includes the ideals and principles of securing a better life for everyone, willing to work hard and play fair, but the context is broader, more inclusive, and the well-being of the planet itself is a priority. Deepen the diversity and restore the prosperity, Van urges. Everything that's good for the earth is a good job. Find the people who most need work and give them the work that most needs to be done. That sounds like good advice to me. Let's welcome a hero to so many of us, Van Jones.
Hello. It's so good to see you. I am glad to be here with you guys. First of all, I just want to acknowledge everybody here is weird. This is a weird group, and I am happy to get to be weird with you. Most people would not spend their Saturday trying to figure out how to come up with a new template to save humanity. They probably would be shopping or something else. So here we are. This is going to be a different talk for me. I'm going to say stuff I've never said before, since most of you guys have been my friends forever, so you've already heard all my normal stuff. So this is going to be an act in 3 parts. The last part will be about the future I think is worth fighting for. I'm going to end where you started to try to wrap that up. The second part is going to be my autopsy on the green jobs movement. Oh, you say, oh, I might stop tweeting now. You know, this could be interesting. And the first part is going to be about something that actually you referenced. I'm going to talk in the first part about Dr. Martin Luther King, Trayvon Martin, and robots. I'm so clever, I amuse myself. Dr. King, Trayvon, and robots. Let's get that handle first so the rest of it can make some sense. You know, this summer was a pretty extraordinary summer if you're African American in public life, because we had this verdict with Trayvon Martin's murder, George Zimmerman's acquittal. If you're close to the black community, if you're in the black community, that was an atomic bomb. I have two black boys. When Trayvon was killed, it was devastating for me as a black dad, because I just was not sure what I was supposed to do as a parent. This guy goes to get Skittles for his little brother, he's wearing a hoodie, and he's killed. You know, you think to yourself, I mean, what do I do with that? The kids, you know, Trayvon's not in a gang, he's not armed, he's just going to buy Skittles. I said, do I have to dress my kid in a tuxedo for him to be able to go buy Skittles for his little brother? What am I supposed to do? And the hoodie became this huge issue in the media. He was wearing a hoodie, you see. And I thought, like a lot of black folk, I said, well, if you see a black kid, he's wearing a hoodie, therefore he must be a criminal. But if you see a white kid wearing a hoodie, you think it's Mark Zuckerberg. So this struck me as somewhat troubling. I mean, can you imagine if in my neighborhood, it's like, I saw this guy. He didn't look like he belonged here. Different race, was wearing a hoodie, so I shot Mark Zuckerberg. What would you have done? So that's one layer of pain. Then there's a deeper level, which is the real level. Where are all the black Mark Zuckerbergs? That's a much tougher question to even let yourself ask. Where are all the black Mark Zuckerbergs? So here I am on TV, my new career, dealing with that. And in the same summer, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech enjoys its anniversary. Same summer, Trayvon Martin Luther King. And what was remarkable to me about the celebration of this speech was understanding something about the speech when it was made. First of all, Dr. King was 34 years old. Now, for some of you, that might seem old, but for the rest of us, he's a 34-year-old kid on the steps. Okay. He was 24 in Montgomery, Dr. King, 24 years old in Montgomery, when the women organized the bus boycott. And he talked like guys do. 24! Now, I mean, I don't mean to offend any of my good young activist friends here, but I would hesitate to let a 24-year-old borrow my car. Got one of the most famous ones here. 24 years old in Montgomery, 34 years old on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, 39 when he's shot. We think about Dr. King as like a 70-year-old dude. He never made 40. And he walks out there and gives a speech which nobody remembers. You got 250,000 people there, biggest rally up until that point. But from our point of view, I mean, we've done rallies that big. So relatively small rally from our point of view. Relatively young guy, supposed to close it out. And he walks out and he gives a speech that somebody handed to him. There had been a committee I'm going to give some black history here. There had been a committee that Bayard Rustin and a bunch of other people set up, and they wrote the speech for him. And he gives his speech, and nobody remembers this. The first 2/3 of the I Have a Dream speech sucks. Do you remember anything about the first 2/3 of that speech? You know why? Because it's horrid. It's a horrid speech. He starts off, 100 years ago, we were freed from slavery, and the government issued us a check, and it bounced. And then it goes downhill from there in terms of its inspirational quality. He talks about police brutality and getting attacked by dogs, and he basically said, and well, thank you very much. And he's about to be done. And the crowd is utterly unmoved, given what the expectation was. And a woman, Mahalia Jackson, says, "Tell him about your dream, Martin. Tell him about your dream, Martin." Why did she say that? She said that because 2 months earlier in Detroit, there had been a major rally, and Dr. King turned in one of his very rare poor performances. And at the end, though, the peroration of the speech, he starts struggling with this idea about a dream and his children, and kind of stutters out. But Mahalia was there. And she saw a promise in that idea. And so as this kid is bombing in front of the whole world, she says, "Tell him about your dream, Martin. Tell him about your dream." Dr. King never reads the last paragraph of the speech. Pushes it to one side, and he looks up and performs the greatest act of slam poetry in the history of the Republic. As we say, off the dome, right? Off the top of his head, performs the greatest act of slam poetry in the history of the Republic. And 50 years later, to your point, there's a plaque on the ground where he stood. This 34-year-old kid freestyling. And 3 presidents. Now remember, the Kennedys didn't even want them to have the march. The Kennedys tried to stop the march. They thought it was going to be a disaster and refused to come. They sent Burke Marshall, and Burke Marshall, who was one of my professors at Yale, famously stood with his hand on the plug for the sound system from Bobby's office, and was going to unplug it if they said anything that was too incendiary. They had mobilized the army because they were so afraid that they had 250,000 black people, there was going to be riots. Okay. And the president didn't want anything to do with it. Only after it was over did the president let them even come to the White House. 50 years later, 3 presidents, Clinton, Carter, and Obama, are throwing elbows at each other just trying to stand on the spot. Look it on YouTube. They finally just went in sequential order. What did this kid do in those few moments that 50 years later, presidents want to stand on the spot where he did it? What did he do? 50 years later, there's a statue of the brother. 50 years later, he has his own holiday. Washington and Lincoln got to share one. What did he do? And what are we doing? Progressive politics has become a politics of nostalgia and lament. Nostalgia and lament. Lament about slavery, lament about segregation, lament about stolen land, lament about stolen labor, lament about all the great crimes and the pain and the suffering of our women and our Native Americans, and all of the lament about the wrongs we've endured, and nostalgia for that one flickering moment where it seemed that the momentum of history was on our side, the 60s. At our best, we are a politics of critique. The disparities, the disparities, the disparities. We could go through the whole list. That was what Dr. King's speech was, the part that nobody remembers. Dr. King announced a politics of a future worth fighting for. That's all. And it is very easy to imagine sitting here that when you talk about, kids holding hands and this sort of stuff, that was something that was easy or obvious. We had 300 years of enslavement and 100 years of Jim Crow racist terror that was still happening when he was speaking. There was not one sentence in that refrain that was reasonable, that seemed plausible. Lest we forget, 2 weeks afterwards, racists blew up a church and killed 4 little girls. 2 weeks later. He was in the middle. We talk about the war against terror. He was still living in a 100-year period of terrorism in the United States against him and everybody he knew. Lest we forget, he was shot to death 5 years later. Lest we forget, 3 years earlier, they blew up his house. And yet when they asked him, tell me about your dream, Martin, he was able to speak about a future worth fighting for. And we live in that future in large part today. In fact, my son is not impressed by Dr. King's speech at all. Like, we do that at school. Which brings me to this question of robots. What is the future that we're fighting for? It would be helpful to know or to have some insight about it. Because what we're doing right now isn't working. And trust me, as somebody who was in the White House when we had 60 votes in the Senate, Pelosi running the House, and President Obama at the height of his global stature, we couldn't get anything done then, or very little. And I talked to some of my good friends in Congress, and they say, well, we've got a jobs plan. I'm like, great, what's the jobs plan? Well, we're going to bring manufacturing back to the United States. And I'm like, can I please have that fork to put in my eye? I mean, this is the best we can come up with? No, you can't come on my show. I mean, and I had to point this out to the Congressional Black Caucus. I said, look, I love you guys, but this is, ridiculous. We can't keep driving looking in the rearview mirror. When the manufacturing jobs left, there were a whole lot of people working on a few machines. If and when they come back, there are going to be a whole lot of machines being worked on by very few people. There might be any number of reasons you want to have advanced manufacturing, but job creation can't be one of them. Steel workers don't touch steel anymore, they touch smart screens. Amazon is going to build in Baltimore a factory to produce and ship books. And the last human that will enter the factory will be whoever drives in the last bolt. The entire building will be a robot. And if Bezos has his way, the vehicles that drive the books around will have no people in them. So what is the future you're supposed to be imagining now for today's little black boys and little white girls and little brown boys? What is the future that we're fighting for? It can't possibly be the case that the best we can come up with is that they get to watch the robots take their jobs. So I'm going to talk about the future in a second. Act 2, green jobs. You know, you did a great job, Judy, of giving the basic instinct that we had coming out of Oakland. So many funerals. I got tired of going to funerals with young people in the caskets and old people sitting up in the pews. You only have to go to a couple of those to realize something is desperately wrong in America. I got tired. I would go to funerals. These kids had more rituals and better etiquette and more of a sense of how it was supposed to go at a funeral than they did at a graduation. I got tired of that. And we said we got to do something to give these young people an opportunity. And they had just passed a bunch of legislation in California to juice up the solar industry. And people were taking those tax credits, and they were trying to get the solar panels put up on their homes. And they were waiting 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, no solar panels. Why? You have the consumers, you have the technology, you have the entrepreneurs. Somebody forgot. Solar panels are great, but they don't put themselves up. Somebody's got to be trained to put the solar panels up. The most important work to be done is repowering America with clean energy. That's the most important work to be done, and it was going undone. Meanwhile, I got all these kids with no jobs in Oakland. And I said, let's connect the kids who most need work with the work that most needs to be done. We'll fight pollution and poverty at the same time. We'll create a green wave that can lift all boats. It was just a hope. But it had a little piece of future in it. First time in my life. It had a little piece of a future in it. And a dramatic thing happened. We got the Oakland City Council to create this thing called the Oakland Green Jobs Corps. Got a couple of kids trained. A woman named Nancy Pelosi heard about it. She came over, looked at it, took me by the hand to Washington, D.C. I testified in front of every committee and subcommittee up there about this little idea. A guy named George W. Bush signed into law my very first proposal called the Green Jobs Act, 2007. Wrote a book about it, became a bestseller. That book is now in 7 languages, 100 US universities. A guy named Barack Obama read it. I wound up in the White House with $90 billion, $90 billion of the stimulus package under my purview. That happened in about 18 months. A little bit of a future. And stuff happened, and I was in the White House for 6 months. Best 6 months of my life, followed by the worst 2 weeks. And I watched that whole thing go up, I watched that whole thing come down, and I've got some lessons I want to share with you, because it informs what we're going to have to do if we're going to have a politics that works for winning a future. Now, I don't have any solutions, unless somebody thinks the last part of the speech is going to be better than it is. But I got a couple of crazy ideas I want to share with you. But I would be insulting you to stand up here and spout out some more cool, groovy stuff to do when I don't account for the last cool, groovy thing I tried to do. And I haven't done that publicly yet, so let me do it now. Hillary Clinton, my friend and mentor, said something that is not true. And I think it has caused a great deal of confusion in the world since she said it. She said there is a vast right-wing conspiracy in our country. And that is not true. She said there's a vast right-wing conspiracy in America. And that is not true. Because conspiracies are secret. Let's just start with that. This is not a conspiracy. The Heritage Foundation put on the front page of its website when Obama was sworn in that their two main goals and objectives were to attack fraudulent climate science and to end the myth of green jobs. That's not a conspiracy. That's called a plan. Okay? Now, one thing one might want to learn, since, they're very clear about what they intend to do, is to take them seriously. They said they had to end the myth of green jobs. Why? They don't attack ideas because they're bad and won't work. They don't spend the $15 million they spent getting me out of the White House. They don't spend that going after ideas that don't work and leaders are not effective. They don't attack ideas because they're bad. They attack ideas because they're good. But the minute the attack came down, everybody who was a part of the most hopeful moment, the most hopeful movement around Obama with the most hopeful idea of green jobs, the minute the first gun started going off, everybody ran away from that. You can't get a liberal to say green jobs in public now if you pay them. Contrast that with our conservative friends on really dumb, stupid, and mean ideas and their utter allegiance to them. I don't mean to be partisan here, but you guys asked me to talk. The Voting Rights Act, so this is not abstract. The Voting Rights Act, which they've been trying to eviscerate since it was passed, which is the bedrock of the democratic participation of African Americans. They started attacking that the very first day. It was a terrible idea to attack it the first day, and every day they attacked it since, and they've attacked it every day for 40 years, and they're about to win. They have a terrible idea they hang on to for 40 years. We have a good idea, we can't hang on to it for 40 months. Somebody said something about confidence. Low self-esteem. You punch one of them, they get mad. You punch one of us, we get sad. Am I wrong? Confidence. Sister asked a question about real folk going through real stuff. Confidence. Something to learn from. Number two, we never announced a numerically clear, cognizable goal for the green jobs movement. Right? So we were then very vulnerable to the critique, well, where are all the green jobs? Now, maybe we should have come up with some crazy number, some aspirational figure, such as something, just some lunatic number, like 1 million green jobs, right? No, don't do that because maybe you'll fall short. How many green jobs are there in America right now? Anybody know? According to the Brookings Institute, no left-wing radical outfit, Brookings, 2.4 million green jobs in America right now. Department of Labor says 3.1 million green jobs in America right now. Let's not be abstract. How many coal miners are there in America? Monday morning, how many people will get up in America and go into the coal mines? 80,000 now. Very close, 80,000. How many Americans will get up Monday morning and go to work in the wind industry in America? 100,000. More Americans will get up in the morning and go to work in the wind industry in America right now today than will go into the coal mines. There's another 90,000 that go to work in the solar industry today, right now, like right now. So there's something about our inability to name and claim our own genius and victory and success that erodes something critical to change making. We should just be aware of that. And the last thing that's tough to digest, and this is tough to speak about in public, but there's something about where we are right now in our consciousness and our caring about each other that makes multiracial coalitions very hard to maintain. Now look, I'm not talking about you. Okay, let's just, someone you may have met. When we sat down at the table with the mainstream enviros, with labor, with the liberals, and we said, we're going to get green jobs, we believed that. And we went out in our communities and we told people that something was going to happen. We told mamas, your children will be able to get jobs if you are part of this. We said, you're going to be able to take the asthma inhalers out of your pocket. To us, that's sacred. You know what I'm talking about. We don't do that lightly. We don't go get folks' hopes up lightly. We expect to be attacked. I mean, they shot Dr. King in the face in front of his friends, 39 years old. Nelson Mandela was in jail 27 years. We didn't expect the whole coalition to fold up over some really mean tweets. I'm going to say it again. We did not expect the coalition to fold up over some really mean tweets and some people talking on television. But it did. That's hard to come back from. We accept that if you're going to have these high aspirations and all these great polysyllabic words and all this type of stuff, and you're going to step in somebody's neighborhood or on somebody's reservation or somebody's housing project or somebody's church basement and try to invite people who don't have much on a journey, you can't just drop them off as soon as the polls change. You just can't do that. And we learned that there's something wrong with the ability of some of our white allies to do something that they usually are very good at, which is math. What is the core support, the pillar and the bedrock of environmentalism in America today? The black vote. If blacks don't vote, Greens can't win. That's math. That's not me playing a race card. That's not you feeling guilty. That's not us holding hands singing Kumbaya. That's math. If blacks can't vote, Greens can't win. Blacks voted 93% for Obama. If we had voted 80% for Obama, you'd have President Romney. And you'd already have the Keystone Pipeline, and you'd be drilling on the Washington Mall. If blacks don't vote, Greens can't win. African Americans are 86% in favor of strong climate action. I'm going to say it again. If you ask black folk, are you for strong climate action, even if it costs you money, 86% say yes. Latinos, 76% say yes. White folks, barely 50-50. It's the African American and Latino community that are the bedrock of the environmental potential in the country. It's just math. It's a divisive issue among white people. We don't watch Fox News. Which means the Sierra Club should be running over the NAACP to get into court to defend the black right to vote. That should be the Sierra Club doing that. But then when you don't see that, we have to take stock. Something is still off in terms of our ability just to be rational together, just to make plans. But it's not about slavery. I'm talking about right now. Why is the environmental community not outraged that they are stealing the black vote all across the country? Voter suppression is a major issue for African Americans. In fact, it was the backlash against voter suppression that really drove that black turnout in 2012. But you heard almost nothing about it from our environmental allies. So what do? We should be happier than we are about what we were able to achieve on the green job side. And we should be sadder than we are about where we are right now when it comes to our ability to work together. So if we're going to have any future worth fighting for, somebody like myself, I've got to take account of the reality of where we are and then try to find some way forward. So I've got some ideas, and I'll share them with you. Like, almost all this stuff I haven't talked about publicly yet, but you've heard all the other stuff. This is Act 3. What are the kinds of things that we could do together or try to do together that might make some kind of a difference? Especially when you look in the face of what appears to be a tremendous amount of indifference on the part of the majority for some of the things that still are devastating lives in poor communities. It's not hostility. Nobody's joining the Klan. There's just this weird indifference, this weird ambivalence. I had one of my environmental allies tell me, well, Van, I just don't know that many people of color. I said, well, we're about like half the country. You just forgot to meet half the country? I mean, how did you? God, I just don't know. I need you to help me. I said, no, you don't. So we got to talk grown-up talk now. We got to talk grown-up talk now. You don't need me to help you. I said, if your kid had cancer, on Monday you know nothing about cancer. On Tuesday you get the diagnosis, my child has cancer. On Friday you know everything about cancer. Because it's life or death. It's life or death. Monday, you know nothing and nobody. Tuesday, you get the diagnosis. Friday, you know everything about cancer. You know everybody involved. You know every institution. You know every thinker. You have every book right by your bed. You don't need my help. There needs to be some feedback where we can see ourselves. So then our natural ethical desires can surface. But right now we hide from each other with a lot of rhetoric. The most popular conversation right now is, we need to talk about diversity. Still? I've been doing that for 20 years. This is tough. There's no point in me sitting up here lying to you guys that where we are right now is acceptable. So what am I supposed to do? Well, if you're in the black leadership now, trying to make an economy that can work for everybody, because I ain't changed. I want an economy that respects the people and the planet, and I'm not going to stop till we get it. But where do we turn? Well, 3 things that we're working on now. Number 1, the same country that has 5% of the world's population and 25% of the greenhouse gas emissions, ours, has 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prisoners. Okay. 1 out of every 4 people locked up anywhere on earth are locked up here in the land of the free. Disproportionately black and brown, way disproportionately poor. Can't possibly succeed as a society when you're wasting that much genius. Just wasting genius. And we've not been able to count on our liberal allies to help us get anything done about it. So we're now reaching out to the Republicans. When you're in this much crisis, and you've been taken for granted this long, you have to do things different. So we're reaching out now. You saw Rand Paul come out and say he's against the drug war. He's against locking up disproportionately African American Latinos for doing the same stuff that white folks have been doing on Ivy League campuses forever. Ask me how I know. Rand Paul is coming out saying he wants to do something about too many of our children going to prison for doing the same drugs that rich folks do all the time. So we're reaching out. And what we're saying is, you'll like this, I think. You got 30 Republican governors. All of them have state budgets in crisis. 30 Republican governors. You're either going to have to raise taxes or start closing some prisons. You have to make a decision. What do you hate more? Taxes or these poor brown people? It's like, and we're even giving them some market-based reasoning. We're saying, look, you're wasting a lot of money here, but more importantly, your financial incentives in your prison system are misaligned. Why shouldn't a prison warden get a bonus when he or she sends a prisoner home who stays home? I say to my conservative friends, you guys say you hate big, failed government bureaucracies that succeed by failing, like the welfare system. You hate the welfare system? You don't like big, failed government bureaucracies that keep growing by doing a terrible job? Talk to me about the prison system. That's the prison system that grows by failing. If that prison warden does nothing and that young man or that young woman goes back to the neighborhood broken and a threat to himself and others, and then comes back in a week with 3 of his or her friends, the prison budget grows. The worse they do, the more money they get. You have no credibility telling me you're concerned about the welfare system. You said nothing about the prison system. The worse the prison does, the more business they create for themselves, the more they then complain about being overcrowded, and they need more buildings, and they need more people. That's what's growing by failing. Now, if you want to work with us, we got an idea for you. Reverse the incentives. If you're a prison warden and you send 10 people home and they stay gone for 10 years, you just saved us probably, I don't know, $5 million. You should have $1 million. Now you've got some skin in the game, Mr. Warden. Your success and this kid's success are now tied to each other. Let's have some market-based, competition-based reform of the prison system, and we'll let the conservatives and the Republicans lead it. Because we're a lot more interested in people than political parties and political ID, since apparently the political parties aren't interested in us. That's where we are. That didn't make you happy. I told you it's not my normal speech. But we got to stop wasting genius on all sides. You know what? It's interesting. The Republican Party, their core vote is a white male evangelical vote. They're not ashamed of that. They're proud of it. The core vote for the Democratic Party is that black vote, and they're ashamed of it and don't talk about it. If we go from 93% to 80%, no Democrat can win for 20 years. What do we get for our support? No liberal cause can win without the black vote. The environmental cause can't win, the women's cause, nobody's issue can win without the black vote. But when we're under fire, when our children are going to prison, when we're going to funerals, when we can't even vote, where is the mutual embrace? This can't last forever, folks. Talk about unsustainable, this is unsustainable. The relationship between the African Americans and the progressive cause is unsustainable. So, we're going to try to create a de-incarceration industry. We have an incarceration industry where people make a whole lot of money locking people up. We want to make an industry where people make a whole lot of money letting folk go and making sure they're successful. Number one. Number two, there's something called the shareable economy. The shareable economy. You've heard about it. Kiva, Kickstarter, Airbnb, Zipcar, Lyft, Uber. It's an economy that's not a cash-only economy. It's a connection-based economy. It's an economy that doesn't run just on financial capital, it runs on social capital. And we are very hopeful that that might be and become an economic antidote to some of the divisions that we find right now in politics. What if in the shareable economy, we were aggressive to make sure that people weren't just sharing with people they feel comfortable with and already know? What if that became the place where we start to restore some of this lost trust? What if the shareable economy becomes a place where we begin to know each other differently and trust each other differently and actually feel that we're a part of each other's lives? What if you had Zipcar in the hood? Sounds crazy, but guess what? You look at the numbers. In Washington, D.C., the most successful Zipcar zip code is in the hood. People were afraid at first if you put those zip cars there, it would get stolen or whatever. It's not true. Some of the most successful bike sharing programs turn out to be in the hood. People thought they would steal the bikes. They don't. What if we get aggressive and say, well, guess what? Maybe we got it wrong in politics. Maybe politics is not the right place for us to pull this off. What if it's in the economy? What if we don't accept that the access economy, which is what they call the shareable economy, is just going to be an excess economy? If you got excess stuff, you can share it with somebody who's got excess stuff. Right? What if it truly was an access economy, and we were aggressive about making sure that people are sharing all over the city, and that people were sharing information and resources? What if we use some of these companies that are already so visionary to help drive some of this. Because we're going to either turn to each other or on each other. What if we see in the seed of this so-called sharing economy, the seed of the medicine to what politics has brought out in us? So there's a new group called peers.org. Peers.org is run by Natalie Foster, who used to run the organization I work for, Rebuild the Dream. We're talking now to peers.org and saying, since you have under one umbrella Zipcar, Kiva, Kickstarter, Uber, Lyft, under one umbrella, can we now reach out and find ways for African American, Latino, Native American, female and other entrepreneurs to connect with you on the economy, to accelerate this beautiful thing that you're doing and include everybody? And the first meetings are going to happen next month. I think we may be able, by focusing on connection and an economy that requires connection and that grows by having connection, we may be able to get away from some of the disconnection that we've discovered still exists over the past few years. And the last thing I'm going to say, and the last thing that we're going to do, is this crazy Hail Mary pass. We don't believe much of what they say about our communities because we either live there or our families do. And we know there's one thing that's happening in our communities that most people don't know about. Real genius on the part of our young people. You often cut on TV, and when you see urban youth, they're doing something negative, and over a while you have an association with them doing something negative. That's not all the kids, as we all know. If you look past the headlines, you actually go into these schools, as many of you do, or in these programs, as many of you do. Here's what you see with these young people. Creativity, incredible creativity, connectivity. Our kids now over-index on Twitter, over-index on Facebook. In fact, African American Latino kids are actually more connected now using new technology than white kids are. Incredible creativity, incredible connectivity, and incredible communications capacity. Well, wait a minute now. What is the economy that's being built based on? The new economy. Creativity, connectivity, communications. There's an economy that's coming where what these kids have is incredibly valuable. Don't look in the rearview mirror and wish you had a factory. Look in the, what's that thing called? Windshield. Thank you, whoever that was. Look in the windshield. Don't beg for a factory. Look at the emerging future. Sense it and shape it based on what the assets are in these communities. We focus on the deficits and the funerals, but every kid's not in a funeral, every kid's not in jail. Look at the assets. Creative, connected, communicative. What do they lack? One thing and one thing only. They can't code. They can't code. They can't do the math. That's fixable. That is fixable. When our ancestors came out of the enslavement, they couldn't read and write. But they said, my baby is going to read. My baby is going to write. I can't do it. But I'm going to make sure my baby does. And African Americans built what they now call HBCUs, those little black colleges that produced Dr. King, that produced Thurgood Marshall, that produced Eleanor Holmes Norton, that produced all the great leadership in the middle of the last century, came out of those little black colleges. Because people who couldn't read and write insisted that their children be able to. The new global literacy is math-based coding languages. And if you had poor kids in Bangladesh, you'd say, teach them how to code. If you had poor kids in Brazil, China, Nigeria, Malawi, you'd say, teach them how to code. So we're launching a new initiative. And it's called Yes, We Code. I like the yes, we can. But I like the yes, we code even better. Yes, we code. We have these little organizations out there already in every barrio, every hood, every reservation, out in the boonies in Appalachia, where you got some 26-year-old kid, some 24-year-old kid, some 18-year-old, some 31-year-old with 14 recycled computers and 16 kids trying to teach them how to code. They barely have any money. They're hoping the next city grant doesn't get canceled. But they're teaching these kids how to code. That's the most exciting, powerful, potentially groundbreaking solution. Why? Because when you bring those kids into technology, you don't just bring in different skin colors. You bring in different life experiences, maybe some different perspectives, different worldviews, different ideas, different things, order of questioning. And you begin to create a human-centered technology, maybe, that's a little bit better equipped, to do some of these things we've been talking about. Yes, we code. What if you created a situation where you had 100,000 disadvantaged kids trained to be the best coders in the world? What if that were your objective? The best. Why do I believe it's possible? Because I remember we just had the big celebration, Ebony Magazine had a big celebration for Berry Gordy. Berry Gordy, who created Motown, which changed music forever around the world. Why was he able to do it? He looked into the community. He listened to the radio, he heard Pat Boone. He said, this sounds corny. And then he listened to the community. And he heard brothers on the street corner doo-wopping. He saw sisters in church harmonizing. And he said, these musical voices and talents, there's genius here. And he pulled them together, and Motown changed the world. The Tuskegee Airmen, they wouldn't let black folk fly planes, and they let a few, and they would wind up being some of our best pilots ever. If you give folk a chance, you heard of Tiger Woods. If you give folk a chance, you never know what's going to happen. So I reached out to a rock star friend of mine named Prince. I reached out to Dr. King's son, Dexter, Chris Tucker, the actor, Lauryn Hill, the pop star, MIT Media Labs. I said, why don't we get 25,000 kids and put them in an arena in Los Angeles? 25,000 kids, put them in an arena in Chicago. 25,000 kids, put them in an arena down in New Orleans. 25,000 kids, put them in an arena in Baltimore, or Newark, or Philadelphia, somewhere on the East Coast. 100,000 kids. Give them little lanyards, let them swipe in, and let them be a part of a community of people. And on the stage, have Jay-Z walk out, and have Zuckerberg walk out, and have all the great people in society walk out and say, we believe in you. Let's have another big cultural moment like the March on Washington. But let it be about a future that's just as unlikely sitting here, but just as compelling. Look out at all those children and say, one of you might be the one to come up with a solution for global warming. One of you might be the one to create the coolest robot ever. We're not worried about a robot taking your job. We want you to design the robot, build the robot, market the robot. We want to give you the tools to design a future that works for you. Code or be coded. We're not mad at you for taking over the block. You're taking over the wrong block. Don't take over a block in Watts. Don't take over a block in Oakland. Take over a block in Silicon Valley. You see. Now, if we are willing to believe that's possible, that's a possibility that makes other possibilities possible. Now you're not having to rely on political calculation and all the weird stuff in people's brains about who matters and who counts and all that kind of stuff. You're talking about giving people something to bring to the table, something of value, so that we can all begin to work together in a better way. Now, if we do that, you could imagine a situation where out of this initiative, you get 100,000 Mark Zuckerbergs, 250,000 Mark Zuckerbergs, 1 million Mark Zuckerbergs, but a whole lot of them look an awful lot like Trayvon Martin. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm standing up here not for applause, but just to see if there's any questions.
I'm developing an eco-spiritual / political superhero, and I'm writing the sequel now. And the first one's actually predominantly based in Africa. But with the sequel, if there was one idea that you would like me to share with a readership of superhero kind of graphic novels and the movies, what one idea, because there was some amazing ideas that you shared with us, that can I put into my story that you think will help your community, well, the community as a general, you know, whether it be whatever the race, whatever the color, but if you have any thoughts there as to that one idea that I could implant.
You know, I don't know if there's one idea. I mean, what I do know is that everybody counts and everybody matters. To me, that's the most important thing. We got to stop wasting genius. Mainly, we got to stop wasting our own genius, BSing ourselves. That's my main battle with myself every day, is to stop. You know, it's very, at this point in my life, I mean, my life is pretty sweet. I mean, I don't have to do very much anymore. I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, the mainstream media, the level of conversation there is not particularly demanding. So, I mean, that came out much worse than so my main battle with myself is just not to BS myself. You know, just being on television arguing with Newt Gingrich is not the high point of human contribution. And as much as I love my job and working with Newt, but and I really do, but I think we have to be tougher on ourselves. I mean, I led my community into a cul-de-sac on the green jobs question. We were able to deliver, but we're going to have exponential growth on the green job side to really get a bite out of poverty. And instead, we got incremental growth. Well, you have to have exponential growth to pull people out of poverty, because you just have incremental growth to people who are already job ready, get all those jobs, and then you're done. So I've led my community into a cul-de-sac. I have to be tough on myself and be tough on my partners. And people don't like that. The room got real quiet when I was laying that out. But we have to do it, because otherwise we're not going to be able to solve any of these problems. And on the other side of real tough talk and tough self-criticism, you do wind up with better answers, I believe, if you're willing to go through it. And I think that the Cut 50 campaign, we're going to try and cut the prison population in half in 10 years, working with Republicans to do that, partnering with peers.org to get the shareable economy to be as inclusive as possible, and Yes We Code. I think all those ideas which come out of the failures in the green jobs movement will have some real value. But they wouldn't have had the same value if we hadn't been willing to go through a serious autopsy and try to figure out what we did wrong. Where can we trust our partners, and where can we not trust them? And that conversation about trust has to be a part of any real conversation about the future.
So you cited 100,000 jobs for solar and 80,000 jobs for wind, but then you cited between 2 and 3 million of green jobs.
Sure.
What's filling in that gap?
The other jobs are in energy efficiency across the board. The other jobs are in smart batteries. There's a whole bunch of work that's going on to make our batteries better. Some of the agricultural jobs that are ecologically responsible are counted now as green jobs. There's a whole, the Green Jobs Act of 2007 defines a whole set of categories. That was my first bill, and we got Bush to sign it. And based on those categories that we defined in that bill, Brookings and Department of Labor do the count. So I'm most passionate about the clean energy edge of the green jobs, but green jobs are a bigger category than just the clean energy jobs. You'll always hear me talking about the clean energy stuff, but it's a bigger category.
Hey, Van, it's Caroline Casey from way back, but we're in D.C. talking to conservatives, which I love, and this was one of your most fantabulous talks ever. We needed some danger in the room. It was good. But I love one of the conservatives at CPAC was saying big government, small government, silly conversation. What do you know about Edmund Burke? Edmund Burke said the more we cultivate inner wisdom and restraint, the fewer outer rules and regulations we know. And I go, this is such a great conversation that unifies everything that Otto and many people are contributing here, which is yes, inward cultivation, fewer outward rules, and again, just spiraling it forth. So, thank you. But I think, all of us are potentially great storytellers to magnetize this conversation across borders, cross the borders and then dissolve that. Anyway, but thank you for your work. But
thank you.
But when I was talking to this conservative, Joe Balistreri, about this, I said, oh, well, this is Taoism. And he goes, I love Taoism. I haven't been able to talk about that with other conservatives. Anyway, just crossing borders. So are you finding more ferment partisan thing going on?
I can't tell. I feel like in a crisis, people get a lot more certain and a lot more uncertain at the same time. So you see people becoming more fundamentalist about their thing, and also like, I don't really know, but so depending on when you catch, literally in the conversation, when you catch somebody, they're either very much about their libertarian thing, or very ambivalent, or very much about their right-wing critique of Obama, or more concerned about how their own party's falling apart.
But now is really strategic, because at CPAC, the deeply educated conservatives are appalled at the Tea Party thing.
Yeah.
And they want to have this common conversation about making culture smarter. So.
Well, the problem is that the big lesson from the last century, which is a lesson the left had to absorb, is that a focus on justice with no appreciation for liberty gives you totalitarianism. The left had to learn that in the last century. If all you care about is justice, social justice, and you care nothing about individual liberty, you get government domination. You get totalitarianism. The lesson for this century is the opposite lesson, and the libertarians are going to have to learn this. If all you care about is individual liberty, and you don't care about justice, you actually get a different form of domination. You get corporate domination. You get a different form of tyranny, corporate domination, which is why the American system says we believe in liberty and justice for all. So the appropriate response to the libertarian caricature is not to say, well, you guys are patriotic and we're globalist, or you guys are mean and we're nice. It's just to say, you guys are right, you're for liberty, but America is about liberty and justice for all. So it's not that you're not, it's not that you're too patriotic, you're just insufficiently patriotic. You haven't embraced the full set of American values that we're still trying to deliver on. So.
Thank you so much for sharing those thoughts. I'm a Latino and Black law student, soon-to-be lawyer, thinking about the way we could use the courts as a catalyst. But
Good luck.
Your talk has also allowed me to think about other new ways of tackling issues that don't involve the court system or the politics of the world. So on that point, do you have any thoughts you can share with us on how to also tackle food shortage and access to quality food for kids using the creativity and all those skills that you spoke about today?
You know, well, first of all, congratulations. What year are you? Third year, almost done. You know, it's interesting because the law degree, I got a law degree 20 years ago. The law, it's true, I'm that old. The law degree was the power degree of the last century. Everybody in the last century was a lawyer. Gandhi was a lawyer. Mandela was a lawyer. The Kennedy brothers were lawyers. Fidel Castro was a lawyer. Lenin was a lawyer. Everybody in the last, why are all these lawyers running amok in the last century? Because the last century, what was key was this question of states and citizenship. Right? Nationhood and nationality. Are the colonies going to be free, or are they going to continue to be dominated? Will they get their own flag and their own laws, or will they have to continue to be subordinated? Are you, as a black person in America, going to have your rights or not? So when you're dealing with a colonial and post-colonial world, lawyers are very important. You're no longer in that world. This is the era of commerce and communications. And so the people who are going to give the biggest, who are going to be the biggest change makers are likely to be people who are in technology and business, because that's the era that you're in. So those of us who, because we're good middle-class Negroes, went and got law degrees, because that's what our parents understood as like success, have a double challenge. You have to learn all that crap and then not use it. So, don't ask me up here if you don't want the honest opinion. It's very good discipline for your mind, and it's a good credentializer. When I was a young black guy running around with dreadlocks in the Bay Area, if I hadn't been a Yale-educated attorney, I probably would have had harder problems than I did. So it's a very good credentializer, but don't let it crush your soul. That's the main thing. A big amount of emotional and spiritual damage is being inflicted on you when you're in law school. They tell you, we're not going to teach you the law. We're going to teach you how to think and be like a lawyer. In other words, it's not an educational process. It's a socialization process. And socialization is brutal. There's a lot of hazing. There's a lot of carrots and sticks, a lot of manipulation. So the fact that you're here, to me, I think is a very hopeful sign and a very important sign. But you're going to be a lifelong learner. You're going to have to educate and re-educate yourself probably 10 times before it's over. 3 years ago, you thought, hey, I'll use the courts. If it turns out the courts are not the right place, but instead somebody with your good looks and intelligence, maybe the court of public opinion might be a better place. Or the courts that they have when they're handing out VC dollars in Silicon Valley might be the right place. You're an advocate, not a lawyer. You're an advocate. And I'm just really proud to see you here.
First of all, I think both of you speakers really brought in inspiration for like young people as us. And the main thing, I think you touched our hearts, both of you. And I think when you talked about Martin Luther King, what he really did is when he went to his dream, he let go of all these things what he had to say. And he really spoke from his heart, because that's where the dream sits into. And I think that's what we need to get back to as people, is being in our hearts and talk our dreams. And I really thank both of you to instill that in us and be able to walk out and live the dream of our new economy. So thank you.
Hi. First of all, I wanted to thank you for that very inspirational talk, and really thank you for putting in the context of projecting to the future decarceration. Because those of us who are familiar with the criminal justice system really do believe we are not driving looking in the rear view mirror, but we're driving blind with the current system. As in, incarceration, particularly incarceration for nonviolent crimes, makes no sense. So my question to you is, in terms of projecting from the future, and projecting 30 years from now, say, and knowing the sort of arcane solution that we, quote-unquote solution that we exist in now, what models, maybe there are other penal systems, what models can we look to? And in particular, voter disenfranchisement. You were talking about 80% of the vote, of the African-American vote, would not have had Obama elected. Well, we have so many dead votes as a result of minorities being unable to vote. So I'd just like your idea of what models we can look to make this change.
You know, it's hard for me to say within any precision, but I'll make two quick observations. One is, you know, to this day, I've never had a beer. I've never had a sip of champagne. I've never touched a cigarette of any kind. Never tried any drugs at all. Very good reason for that. I'm about 1/8 Native American, and all the men on my dad's side of the family have had all kind of problems with that stuff. They were great, functional, you know, hard-working, middle-class people, but they had problems with alcohol. And so I asked my mom one time, I said, geez, why does Dad and my uncles, you know, act like this when they're acting like that? And it's because they were drinking alcohol. And given your heritage, you probably can't drink it, and if you do, you'll act like them. So I said, I'm never going to drink. I was 4 years old. Best decision I ever made in my life. So I say that because it gives me a rare lens on how addicted this culture is, and who gets punished for that and who doesn't. When I was at Yale, I saw so much rampant drug use and drug abuse on the campus, and I never saw one kid go to jail. I never saw a single kid go to jail. You want to talk about some serious drug abuse? You want to find real drugs in New Haven, Connecticut? Go to Yale. Go to Skull and Bones. And you will see serious drug use. What I saw was the police driving past Yale with their lights flashing 4 blocks down to the housing project and putting kids who were using much fewer drugs in handcuffs and taking them away and giving them sentences longer than some of them have been alive. And I couldn't understand it because from my point of view, having been raised in the church and having been raised in the South, Jesus sees all of y'all. All of y'all are sinning. But only these kids are going to prison. And I asked my dean at the time why that was. I said, you have us here in this law school learning about equality before the law, but I can walk out the front door and say that's not true. And my dean told me, well, Mr. Jones, you have to understand. Those kids out there, they're pushing drugs, they're drug abusers, they're in drug gangs. Our kids are just experimenting with drugs. I said, well, sir, I can find no such exception in our Constitution or our law. So let's be real clear that this so-called drug war is not about doing anything about drugs. I can't even watch. I didn't have a television until I got my own show. So most of you don't have them either. That's why you're sane. I can't even watch TV. I just put it on the DVR or whatever because I have to zap through all the drug commercials. That's all they do is sell drugs. Your wee-wee not working, here's some drugs. I mean, it's every other commercial is about trying to fix men's wee-wees. I don't understand why that's like, the thing. You guys don't watch TV, so you know what I'm talking about, but it's terrible. From my point of view, that's where we've got to be uncompromising. Stop putting people in jail stop putting poor people in jail for doing stuff rich folk do all the time. Number two, this whole racial thing is really painful for me. I mean, it just hurts. Now, first of all, I'm married to a white woman, and I'm raising, my kids are African American by our standards, but they're mixed race. And I don't know what to do. I feel like Obama is in the same situation. You try to talk nice about it, people don't like it. You don't talk about it, nothing changes. You talk about it with some sternness in your voice, everybody looks constipated. I hope he's not talking about me, you know. But it's the biggest thing happening in America. We are becoming a multiracial democracy like Brazil, like South Africa. We have to deal with it. We've got to be able to talk about it. We really have to. And it's hard. Even somebody like me, I think I have a reasonably decent reputation of, wanting to work across these lines, but it's very difficult to talk about. And there's this great brain science now that's actually very encouraging. I just want to say this because I should have had it in my speech, and if I ever give an honest speech again rather than my usual propaganda, I'll make sure to include this very hopeful brain science. It turns out both the right and the left are wrong on race, and both the right and the left are right on race. This is very hopeful stuff, actually. If you listen to, this is caricaturing, but just go with it for a second. If you listen to the right on race, here's what they'll say. That was a gazillion years ago, okay? People have come a long way. You raising it is actually now the problem. You talking about it is actually causing more division than it's solving. Some of you are race hustlers who just play the race card because you see some advantage in that. It's dishonest. And the best thing you could do at this point is just shut up talking about race and quit dividing everybody. Okay, that's what the right would have a tendency to say. The left would say the opposite. A, it wasn't that long ago. B, it's still happening. And we have to talk about it because if we don't, people just suffer in silence, which is also unfair. Well, the brain science is actually very interesting. Both sides are right, and both sides are wrong. What the brain science shows, but right. The cerebral cortex of pretty much anybody in America is not racist. You hear. If somebody asks you, honest question, do you want to live in a society where white people are on the top and everybody else is on the bottom? You will say no, and you could pass any lie detector test. You actually don't want that. This is a tremendous achievement in a country with 400 years of stolen land, stolen labor, segregation, and all these horrible numbers that we see right now today. In other words, if you look at the Pettus Bridge when they're marching across and all the police line up and you have John Lewis standing there and all the whites are over here and the blacks are over here, today there would be no whites on the other side. Almost every white person in America would come over to John Lewis's side. There would be an open road. That is a miracle in human history that we did in America with very little violence, at least very little retaliatory violence. Keep it real. The left is wrong to deny that. And to pretend that nobody paid attention and that Dr. King died in vain and that people can't improve because people have improved. And the brain science will show you. But most of the human brain is not conscious. This is the minority part. It's the rest of the human brain that Dr. King hasn't won over yet. And there, you show somebody a picture of a black male, all kind of stuff goes firing off. including black people. If you show black people the picture, shows you how bad it is. It's not just you, me. So what does that mean? That means that we have more work to do. That's not just rhetorical. That's a scientifically provable fact. And it gets even better because guess what makes a difference when it's the subconscious? Getting the things in the subconscious mind into the conscious mind. Give you one example. Doctors are terrible to black patients. This is not a slur against doctors, it's a statistical fact. Doctors, seeing a black patient, will say to a black patient, you need surgery. Seeing a white patient, they'll say, take these pills, change your diet, change your lifestyle. Why? Subconscious mind says, this person's non-compliant. Black folk are non-compliant. Their lives are too messed up. They're not going to do what I say, so I'm just going to cut them open and fix it myself, but I trust you, right, to be able to change their behavior. This is statistically proven. That's not Van Jones, mad at somebody. How do you fix it? Do you ignore it? They don't talk about it? You don't want to make somebody feel like you call them a racist? Create racial anxiety? Racial anxiety is a lot of what you feel. You don't feel a lot of racial hostility. You feel a lot of racial anxiety. That's different. Nope, that's an achievement. You aren't sitting there, I wish that black guy would sit down and shut up because he's black. Right? You might say, I wish he would change the subject. That's different. That's different. Anxiety. So do you fix it by making the anxiety worse? Which, if you call somebody a racist, if they're conservative, they get mad. If they're liberal, they start crying, but the behavior doesn't change. This is just data. What changes a behavior? Turns out you go to the doctors, all of them, and you say, well, it looks like statistically, sometimes some doctors might over-prescribe the surgeries based on race. So it's just something we want to make sure everybody's aware of so we can try to do better. It turns out 93% change just with the information. Just with the information. Nobody's a doctor because they want to hurt black people. That's not what most people go to medical school to do. But you got to get the feedback. In other words, you've got to be able to talk about it. But how? And what's the right methodology? And the right heart and the right skill? We don't know. We're trying, you see. But if we in this room can't deal with this, even when we get a good idea like green jobs and everybody's all happy, the minute that the attack comes, suddenly there's not the resolve. Suddenly, certain people in the coalition get left behind. Suddenly, it's on to the next cool catchphrase. Green jobs wasn't a catchphrase for black people. It was a lifeboat. It was a desperately needed solution to a desperate problem. It wasn't good phrasing. So, I'm out of time. But look, my friend right here, I know I'm out of time, but my friend right here had a question she didn't get to ask. Can she at least ask the question? Maybe we'll deal with it at the panel level, but I just want to make sure. She was back there waving her arms.
I just wanted to, well, number one, thank you for the great speech, but also hone in on the third point that you were raising, which is tapping onto the next generation's genius, which I think I definitely can see that there's definitely a need for strong technical capabilities and better mathematical skills. But I think there's a bit of a gap in that formula, just because, number one, not everyone's going to be good at coding, and not everyone's going to be passionate about coding. But two, basic foundation of economics, law of supply and demand, there's going to be a potential oversupply, and therefore not much demand for it down the road. So in terms of that formula, what do you see might be other sectors that could be tapping in and other kind of skill sets that the next generation should be tapping into? And tertiary to that, there's always this notion in economics again, whereby it's a labor efficiency thing, right? There's going to be new labor economy moving throughout, and there's going to be gaps between that transition period where there's the new labor economy forming through. What kind of institutional foundations do you think our government needs to kind of put in place to, I guess, limit the risk between that transition period for future generations?
Those are longer questions than I can answer well, but what I will say is this. When we said 100,000 kids, there's a reason for that. You're not going to oversupply the labor market with 100,000 kids. And given where, and also our understanding is that being able to be proficient with computer languages isn't just going to be for like the hardcore coders, that more and more different parts of the economy are going to require that or reward people who can do it. And so without going further than that, we're deliberately trying to limit the claim that we're making, but we do think that, and I'll close with this. Right now, if you're a poor black kid, poor black boy, you only have 4 role models that are valid. Ball player, rapper, drug dealer, Barack Obama. We're just trying to add a 5th option. Thank you very much.
So we're going to do a wrap-up with some closing comments, starting with Otto.
I would like to take a moment of just silence together to let everything we just heard sink in and appreciate the moment. It's not my role, but I want to thank you, Van, and all of you. So what I feel is really appreciation of the moment. Of a sense of possibility that I feel that's kind of breathing through what you are saying, and through the listening from all of us. I'm also aware we are here, we just saw another major political shift that wasn't mentioned yet, the de Blasio win, which opens up a whole new situation, a whole new set of opportunities, and new coalitions, new connections. And we know where's the future starting locally, so that means cities, right? So that's, if we can make it work here, there are so many other cities where the same could be replicated. So it's right here amongst us. I know during lunch break we had some conversations around that. And I'm also, Van was mentioning kind of the, so yes, there have been real accomplishments. And the civil rights movement, kind of, you also mentioned South Africa. Who would have thought kind of the peaceful transition into the post-apartheid period? So we saw, and I feel I'm part of a generation where I have seen mountains shift several times. And one of these times was actually in Berlin. I was quite active in the East and West peace movement, civil rights movement. And even a few weeks before the wall in Berlin collapsed, we took a group to East Berlin and to Eastern Europe, and we talked to the civil rights, the grassroots movements there, and hardly anyone was believing in that. So let's not forget about that. But you could see the crumbling in the system. You could feel it, and you could see it coming many years. And yet, based on all the evidence and based on all the history, it was never going to happen. And
then the disruption did happen. So and when you double click on that and you say, well, why? Kind of what were the forces? A lot of that with grassroots and civil society. And where did that come from? Well, from places, right? To build that community, to build the new DNA, you need places. So I was thinking, so you were talking about the 250,000, kind of 4 different locations, huge arena. We need places in every single city where kind of these new coalitions, these new behaviors, these new, where we like incubators, kind of not only of cool new technical ideas, but really also of the new social field and the transformation of the social field that we need in order to bring forward the innovations that we have been talking about. So what we really need is, it's this, you need to learn all this stuff and then you need to learn not using it. That is true for for a lot of education today. And what we don't learn is what we really need, which is a transformation literacy. Kind of that has an economic, an intellectual dimension, a social dimension, a practical, technical dimension. And that's what's really necessary today. And what I think, because we have all the pieces, we could create easily and bring to scale, and it would put into place, a place, kind of a shelter, kind of an incubator, because any kind of revolution, any kind of profound change, and any type of profound innovation happens in places. So it's seeded there, it's developed there. It's not only the Bauhaus revolution, kind of that in the 20th century that started 5 people in a single building building up a school. Today, it's not the physical Bauhaus, it's the social architecture that's at stake, but the principles are the same.
Well, I'm very grateful to be here with Van and Otto and all of you. And I wanted to pick up on something someone in the audience said about love. And I feel that Van and Otto, despite the pain and fear you may have experienced in different things in your life, that you are both operating from a place of love. And I think that that's such an important thing. And having that balance of head and heart, sort of like the balance between liberty and justice, that gets to that place. And when I was introduced by Dan, he mentioned something about my bringing the feminine to the economy, and I thought I would say something more about that. And by that, I don't mean gender. I mean the feminine and the masculine. That's in Van and me and Otto, and how it's out of kilter now in our society and in our economy. One of my farmers, Mark Dornstrike, once commented to me that good farming is the balance between the masculine and the feminine, between efficiency and nurturing. That if you have too much efficiency, you might run your business really well and use your time well, but your product's not going to be very good. On the other hand, if you have too much nurturing and not enough efficiency, you might have beautiful tomatoes, but you're going to go out of business because you spent too much time with those tomatoes and not on running your business. So when we look at our economy, and especially the food economy, most of the extreme examples of too much efficiency and not enough nurturing is like in factory farming, where the animals are given the littlest of bit, the tiniest possible food, light, air, space. It's all about efficiency. How much money can we wring out of the chickens and the pigs and the workers and so on, and the land, and how little nurturing. Sometimes our schools are even like that. Or certainly our prisons have no sense of nurturing. It's all about efficiency. And you know, I think that bringing that that into balance, and I feel that, you know, for me, my most important decisions have come from that place of balance. When I decided to buy 100% renewable energy in my business, it wasn't, and this goes back to that question about teaching ethics in the classroom. It's not where it comes from. When I made the decision to buy 100% renewable energy, I didn't do it because it was the right thing to do. I didn't do it because I learned that in ethics class. I did that because I love this world. I love the woods, I love the animals, I love life on Earth. And when I made the decision not to use factory-raised meat, it wasn't because I thought it was the right thing to do. It's because I loved the pigs. You know, I loved the chickens, I loved the animals. So I think that's a really important, important idea to come from a place of love. And that's what really I feel is the driver. And in our work right now, protecting what we love, because everything we love is at stake right now. Our environment, our communities, the future for the children of all species. That's what we need to work for, to protect what we love.
I was just listening, so what are we?
Just wrapping up.
Just wrapping up. Oh, bye. Look, I appreciate you just for giving me a chance to talk honestly. Like I said, I told you it was not going to be my normal speech. It's very easy to get up and do propaganda, feel-good stuff, so that everybody likes you. And everybody, oh, we can have that black guy come, he won't make us uncomfortable. And I don't want to BS myself for you. I want us to do a good job. And you know, 5 years ago, everybody in this room was very happy. We did something really incredible. People were in Chicago watching Obama walk out 5 years ago with his very dark-skinned wife and those little girls who are now almost as tall as me. People around the world were crying. People around the world were crying. We act like that never happened now, because it's just so painful to remember how much hope we had. But all the beautiful people in the country didn't leave. All those people who are out there crying, all those people who are out there hugging each other, all those people all around the world, we're still here. And, you know, you got to look at the heartbreak. We went from hope to heartbreak. You got to look at it. But I honestly believe in every breakdown, if you look at it honestly, there's a chance for a breakthrough. There's a chance for a breakthrough. And you're going to see me take a lot more chances now. I mean, I'm not just trying to be a TV star, or, you know, like I said, it's very easy now. But it's very easy for you too. We can all sell out without knowing it. And I need to be a part of a community. I really want to be closer to the Schumacher folks, because the ideas that we're arguing about on television, if the Democrats won everything they wanted, we'd still be screwed up. Like, we're not even asking for the right things. We're not even having the right conversation. We aren't even putting forth the right ideas. And I don't know what the ideas are that would make a difference. So we really need each other. And I invite anybody, you know, if you see me, if there's any way for me to do a better job, you know, help me. And let's all stick together. And I appreciate it.
That program really pissed me off. I don't know how you guys feel. Because I pride myself in being like a quick study, you know. Yeah, I heard those guys for 4 hours and I got it, and I'm literally, my head is spinning, and it's been a long time since my head has spun, so I'm not thanking you guys for that. However, I'm still coming from, so what's my takeaway? Schumacher board's meeting the rest of the day. We're meeting tomorrow, and we're all about what are we going to do next year. And my usual thing as well, we're going to do these 8 projects, and we're going to do them cheaper, faster, better, and we're going to make a difference, and we're going to win the game. That whole American male thing is alive and well. So my biggest takeaway from today is sort of 3 things. I'll tell you the third first, and then the second, fourth, and the first, third. But The first is the permission to dream, or maybe the necessity to dream. And I'm a mathematician. I'm like, we can't dream. We got to get to work. But the dreaming part, I think, is maybe really, really, really important. I can't figure it out yet, but to think that there's a possibility that I could do some real good, like in this world, to think there's a possibility all the offspring of all the species might have a shot, I feel just talking about it. I don't know. It's a big deal. And to hold that space. Everyone keeps telling me to hold it. I don't really still know what it means, you know what I'm saying? But that's, so permission to dream, the necessity to dream, and the importance of like staying there in the fire, not be the ones that just like, gotta go, didn't work. Then the second thing is, I shampooed this morning. I didn't bring my own shampoo, so I used the hotel stuff upstairs, and I smell like someone else. And I keep thinking there's someone right there. And it's like Monsanto. And that's my personal goal, to be spied on. My mom always said that going, when they spy on you, you know you did some good work. But that's the second point, is there are no enemies. Like the questions about the big bad companies, and I know how we don't have a shot at changing the company. I don't think that's not a viable strategy, but we have a shot at changing consciousness. And I believe all people are good, and all people in the right situation are our system, and our economic system in particular, puts them in a place where they do other things. So we can evolve our consciousness, and that will drive these other, you can't change Monsanto, but you can change the people there, and boom, that organization will change overnight when their thinking changes. So I feel like this has been tremendously helpful for me personally and us, like organizationally right now. Perfect timing, Susan, as always. But it's like, keep doing the work, keep doing the projects, keep doing that stuff, but know that like the required shift is in here. It's, so Thoreau said, I'm going out there to mine my soul. Ziggy Marley said the same thing. And so that's kind of my conclusion, to as an American male that just wants to win. Susan, as a chairman of this organization, I just want to win. But that, I already lost. It doesn't work. And so it's this thing about permission to dream and to somehow to change the whole psychological approach of what we're doing, the whole consciousness. That's the only way of getting back to that human thing that we can win. So dream, hold the space, no enemy, just thinking, and kind of back to what that guy said about be the shift and be the change. So thank you, Judy, for being awesome and moderating so well, and Van and Otto, I don't know, just even to be, you guys are, it's an honor beyond anything, that I can even say. And thank you, Dale, again. I'm in such trouble for telling you guys she lives upstairs. She wants you to know she lives mostly on her farm in Connecticut, where she grows blueberries, and only part-time upstairs. And some other place probably that we don't know about. But she's a tremendous supporter, and she does the right thing, and it's no one's fault. We're just here, and all you're doing is the best with what you got, and that's really important. So, the last point, there is a bar mitzvah soon in this room, but we have some time to hang around, and Susan will be here. There's more books available if anybody wants them, and thank you guys so much for coming. Thank the three of you. It was just a spectacular day.